All right, welcome to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today we're very fortunate to be able to have a really nice presentation on 6 cheeses and 4 accompaniments. But most important, we get to learn a little bit more about Forever Cheese. And of course, the special guest today is Michele Buster. And it's such a pleasure. We've crossed paths many times, but never had the opportunity to really sit down. So I'm really looking forward to this today. So I'm going to turn it over to Michele, and she's going to take it from here. Michele?
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, it's truly an honor to be here and to be invited to do this presentation. And hi, everyone. There's a lot of you I know, and thank you so much for joining us today for this cheese class. It means a lot to me that, you wanted to spend the time to taste and hear what I have to say. My company is Forever Cheese. It wasn't always called that. It was a very difficult 2 Italian last names. And I learned cheese starting day by day, going back into the early 90s. And before then, I pretty much just knew what we all Americans knew growing up. And I never really thought about cheese as being made from cow's milk or goat's milk or sheep's milk or buffalo milk. It was just cheese. So until I went and lived and traveled to Spain and Italy, I didn't ever know that they made cheese with sheep's milk. It didn't occur to me. I grew up with red delicious apples. It didn't occur to me till like almost 8 years into my career in cheese that there was over hundreds and hundreds of varieties of apples. And just the same way that these things I learned day by day, it's how I learned the industry of cheese and specialty foods. You'll see you have some almonds as part of your package. They're called Douro Almonds, and they're one of the accompaniments that we're doing, but that's one of hundreds of varieties of almonds. So today will just be a little walk, meandering a little bit through Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Croatia. So I can share some of, these are my kids, everyone, everything here. These are a lot of my kids. They're not all my kids. We have almost 500. And to work in this business is really to feel like I have children. And because, you can't see this guy, but we'll get to him later. The Leonora, which you have, actually behaves, can have bad hair days. So it can get really fuzzy and furry. It can get some green mold and blue mold. And mold is fine, but it changes. And every single cheese has its fits and its good hair days and bad hair days and its moods. It's a living, breathing organism. And that's what we have to learn. So it's not always going to be perfect. And just like with an apple, you'll cut out, I cut out the bruise and I keep going. If you have mold on a piece of cheese, you don't just toss it. You have to work with it. You wipe it off either with olive oil or with some vinegar, or you might cut off that little piece because you don't like it, and you work around it, but you don't need to throw out the entire piece. So it's kind of a journey, and I think we'll start the slideshow to just give you a little bit of some history, more history and background of who we are. So this is Pierluigi Cini. This is my ex and my partner. Without him, we wouldn't have Forever Cheese because we worked for his family's company for 6 or 7 years. Again, his company was Cini Fulvi. And what's amazing is that in those few years, and we managed to build that name. So some people who have been in the cheese business for this long still know it. But the majority of the people had a really hard time saying that. They would think we said Cini Folding. They thought we were like a box company. So at some point, we just did some brainstorming and came up with the name Forever Cheese. But it was really Pierluigi who very much taught me in the beginning so much about every single of the Italian cheeses were there. And later I got to teach him a little bit. But I don't even know how to explain it, because no matter what it is, you can't really cram for it. There's so much to know. It's about the producer. It's about who they are, their terroir, what they do, what's tradition, what's new going with tradition. It's so much together. For me, it's like being the head treasure hunter I dub myself. And what we do at Forever Cheese is we're importers. So we buy from these countries, we import and store in our warehouse, and we are the guard keepers, the gatekeepers, the voice for our products. So they're super diverse. There are some ones that are called DOP, or PDO in English. That's protected denomination of origin. And then there's so many cheeses that we introduced that we had to teach people what they are, teach people how to say them. That big round wheel that you're looking at with the leaves in the middle is called sottocenere. Now, what I learned as I kept going on with the years, that if you can pronounce it, you sell it better. But amazingly enough, that's one of our biggest cult cheeses. It's a cow's milk cheese with ashes on the inside, and the rind is cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, cardamom, fennel, and licorice. So we pride ourselves in finding these incredible jewels from our producer partners and bringing them to the US. And it's our job to be the cheerleader and to get retailers and restaurants and distributors excited with these products, because we have what's the word of it? We have a responsibility to our producers. And in fact, you know what we've been going on with this pandemic really challenged so much, not our mission, but it challenged how we could best work with our producers and help each other through this situation. And I'll go back to it because our mission statement's up here. And this is truly who we are and what we do. We want to bring the absolute best quality products from each of the countries that we deal with. And that's no compromise. So no flaws, no shortcuts. If we don't think we can do it, we don't bring it. We didn't do Taleggio, which is a pretty well-known cow's milk cheese from Italy, until we thought we could handle it properly, because we didn't want to screw it up. And because when we bring a cheese or a nut cheese, we don't just talk about the product, we talk about the producer and who's behind it. The mostarda, the crabapple mostarda that you have there. I mean, this to us represents Paula, and you'll see Paula in a little bit. So each person has a name and a face, and those people, it's their livelihood. So we are joined at the hip to make this work. I need great product. I need to learn as much as I can about it and share it with the people who help me sell in my company, because without them, these days, I don't have time to be on the road selling in every state like I used to. It used to just be really me across the country and sometimes my partner. But now I have to do other things. Half of them are not as fun as they used to be, regulatory and other things, but I do get to go to Europe a lot. Those of you who know was not before the pandemic at the apartment very often. But it's an amazing world of wonderful specialty food products that is really rewarding. What I just wanted to tell you was a little bit about what happens with the pandemic. I know that I heard a lot of people talk about local in this time, supporting local. And since my local is in Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Croatia, it was still a very real crisis. If I didn't have the market to sell my product, which we didn't, most of it seemed like from 500 products, everybody thought we had 20, and only one of those 20. So it was a super crisis. And the thing is, animals continue to produce milk. Just because there is a pandemic on, it's not like the goats stop giving milk or the sheep. So they have to collect the milk and do something with it. And so they're not going to throw it away. They're going to make cheese. And so with all that cheese, they stock up on cheese. And then I have exclusive relationships with a lot of our products. So I'm not buying and they're not selling. And then the cheese is piling up. So my problems are their problems, and it's globally. Thankfully, we have a lot of great customers that we did some videos from our producers telling their plight and asking for help. And I had a lot of people support us and help run promotions when they had retail stores and help move some cheese. But it's gone to the very tips of everybody's toes and ears and all the far corners of the world, how it's affected everybody, from the grower to the person giving milk, to the people who collect it, to who makes a cheese that has a finite life, to when it gets here. And we did an awful lot of donations in this time. We do donations anyway, but not to the level that of all the thousands of pounds that we gave away. It was fantastic for the people who got to taste things that don't normally, but it was still very traumatic, all of it. And we have such great producers that there was really, we felt that support, and we gave it right back. We sent them videos and letters telling them that we were here to support them and that they weren't alone, and thanking them for, in the face of the pandemic, there wasn't a producer that we worked with for a single day that said, we can't ship to you because there's a pandemic. All of those workers went to work to make cheese because they had a responsibility both to the farmer and to us. And for that, we are eternally grateful. And we feel very fortunate to have these partners and the greatest quality that we have. Okay, next slide, please. This is Mythica. This is our brand. Not everything that we carry is Mythica branded, but we take a selection of things that we find even super special and that we'd like to put our name on it. And we call it Mythica for being, it stands for mythic in Latin. And the idea is to have a trail of who we are, because since we buy products from so many different producers, you can't just say that. People say, like, how do I find your product in a store? But my brand of Quadrello is Quattro Portoni, and this brand is Cacio de Roma, and this cheese is called Campo de Montalban. So there's a lot of things it's hard to tell if you want Forever Cheese's product. So we created Mythica to have more of a trail for that. And even more so, Mythica for us stands again for that excellence that we want to have every single day of the year. The accompaniments that we chose today are super fun. This almond, I made up this name. This almond, if you went to Portugal, you wouldn't find it. This is a bag of what it looks like from a retail, what we would sell to a store or to a restaurant. They are a mixture of all different varieties that grow in Portugal. My producer is super basic. They're in the Douro Valley, which is why I gave it the name Douro. And it's not one variety of almond. But in the world, there are so many types. So if you look at your almond, I want to show you here. Let's see how I do this. This almond, these are actually the raw Douro. Yours are fried, but they're not salted. You guys might know the Marcona almond. This is the Marcona. It's tanner, it's rounder, very much decidedly rounder. And we fry these and then we salt them too. Then I have Larghetta. This is Larghetta. This is toasted, so it's not fried, but it's toasted. So it kind of peels off a little bit more. But it's longer than the Douro and more oblong and not as round as the Marcona. Each one of these has a different flavor profile. It'll depend on the terroir where it grows and when it flowers. So for example, did I just screw up this? It takes me forever to get this stuff just right in the space. What makes like the Marcona so special is that it flowers in February, which is a very delicate time, and most other almonds flower in March when the weather is more stable. So it's the terroir, it's when the flowering and everything else. The Portuguese almonds, I like them because they're not too hard. They're very fruity. The frying just gives it a really nice crunch to it and enhances the sweetness. And I just did an almond that didn't have salt on it just because we wanted one like that. One of the other accompaniments that you have is the fig jam. So there's 1,000 different varieties of figs. In Spain, there's one called the pajarero. The pajarero is a very thin, thin-skinned, juicy fruit. These guys, this is the family that makes it. They're called Payarope. They're the Valles brothers. Andres is wearing red. There's Andres, Luis, Jesus, and Guillermo. What happened to your hair? Last time I saw him, he had hair. Oh my God. Anyway, I've been working with those guys since the late 90s. And this is just figs and lemon honey, nothing else, no added sugars, just super. And I made sure that they made it for me chunky because I grew up in my household. My dad liked applesauce too much, and I didn't want anything that had the texture of applesauce. I wanted you to get that juiciness of the fig. And so sometimes when people go look for this product in the stores, it costs more than in other places. And that's because it only has these 2 ingredients and they're so fresh. You can use dried figs. You can put a bunch of other things that flavor a jam that costs less than the actual main product itself. And you increase the sugar level and that makes it less costly and it draws out what it is. But this is just 2 things. And I love it. And, you know, honestly, if I don't love it, I can't sell it. The mostarda, we did, we're very proud of these new jars. We did a whole new rebranding over the past 1.5 years. And a mostarda actually refers to a spicy mustard extract that gets added to fruit that's been candied. And there's 2 main areas in Italy for mostarda. One is Cremona, where they do whole fruits. And then the area where Mantova is, they do cut pieces. So that lady you saw, Paola, was a pharmacist who really loved her food. So she started a company that just made the mostarda. And I kind of get it because the mustard extract acts kind of like a hazmat. It's a hazmat if you don't add sugar to it, but there's some sort of a chemical reaction that when you add the sugar to this mustard oil, it converts into something edible. And then you have this amazing contrast of sweet from the candied fruit with the spiciness from the juice. So the juice is key in when you use this. And besides cheese, and you want to use this with the flavorful cheeses because it will overpower the younger ones. So more towards the end, you'll get a better balance of the 2. But I always say, at the end of the day, you put with things what you like. It also makes amine. It's great with charcuterie. It's nice as a glaze. It's good with grilled meats. Some of them that don't have the spicy extract, I just sit there and I eat it in chunks. But it's a super fun condiment and one that takes a long time to introduce in the marketplace because it's, you know, if you just say it's a mustard, you confuse people. You're like, huh? So that mostarda, that spicy extract is what creates the mustard part for it. And then you have these cool crackers, which I kept running over. Yours is a green stripe bag, and I had that around here. These are a couple of other flavors. I kind of couldn't decide between our 2 different looks, the ones that you have with the stripes and these. So we did both, kind of like stripes and solids when you're playing pool. These are called taralli. And taralli are made by this guy, Gianni. He's from Puglia, so if you get further south, you have to really be on top of the people and make sure everything's, you know, that quality day in and day out. But good people. The first taralli I ever liked, it's a cracker, so it's that little loop-shaped cracker. What I liked that I find different and special about these, that there's hundreds of taralli in this country, really, for all the years. And I'm always like, taralli, no, they get stuck in my throat, taralli, no. But these have this wonderful olive oil that just have this flakiness that make it so fun to eat. I just eat them, and again, and again, and again, until finally I've eaten half the bag. And then I'm like, no, stop. But honestly, there really is a difference. And we do quality control all the time. I have some over here on my desk. I'll just randomly open them and taste them because, you know, stuff can happen in production. And sometimes I have to say, hey, cook these a little less, or I cooked them a little more, or weren't they a little bit fatter next time? So they really do, we work together and just make sure that our producers know that we always are in tune to what they're making and what they're sending. So all of those things should help enhance your cheese tasting today. Cheese, it sounded like I said teas. And I think that we can get started with some of the cheeses that we have for you today. And I added some guests to be with you, some of sheep and some goats and some different things just to come in and join our party. So we're going to start with this guy first. The cheeses, we're going to taste them in order of flavor profile, you always want to taste cheese from mild to sharp. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish that. Buffalo milk is the creamiest and highest butterfat milk that you can find. So I would always start with a cheese that has, with buffalo. After that, I would go to cow's milk. After cow's milk, I would do goat's milk. And after goat's milk, I would do sheep. Now, there's always a challenge at some point. You're like, well, there's a blue. Where do you put blue? Blue has a lot of piquancy and very sharp, so you do that towards the end. I remember years ago. Was that me? No. Okay. You guys can hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool. I want you to look at for a minute this wheel of Quadrello before we continue. See this mold? This mold is very important. Some molds are different than other molds in cheese. So this happens, this is what we call a washed rind cheese. A washed rind cheese has, once it's made and in order for the rind to be formed, you take a saltwater brine and you're continually washing it and rubbing it all over here. And that actually invites the molds to grow. And you're aging it in a high humidity atmosphere. And the higher the humidity, the more the molds like to go. So when you have in your mind, oftentimes people talk about cave aged, and a lot of cheeses were for many years aged in caves. There's high humidity in the cave, so those molds just are like hanging around, and then they like to attach themselves to the wet and the humid part in the cheese. And we need that mold for the development of the cheese, for it to be good. And the actuality, mold shows you that a cheese is alive. If you ever buy cheese and it stays in your fridge and it doesn't grow mold, that's when you need to be worried, because that's not normal. That's not normal at all. So more and more we're showing cheese with mold. It doesn't mean you have to eat the rind. We should talk about that too. Let's do that. Let's talk about rinds and how you organize a cheese plate for a second. In case you all don't want to wait before you eat some of the cheeses as we're talking about it, just if you're going to start, you want to start first with the Quadrello. That is the buffalo milk. And then the next lightest one after that would be the Smokin Goat, because we don't have cow. So this would be your number 2. Nope, I lied. Campo de Montalban, which is cow, goat, and sheep. So the cheese with your zigzag rind with the green wine. This would be your second one. Smokin Goat would be your third one, because it's a young 15-day age goat cheese that's been lightly smoked. Then we'd move to Leonora, which you can't see. And I forgot Leonora Fuego in the fridge. It's just a wedge. This is Leonora. Look at this gorgeous baby. This will be after that, followed by Cacio de Roma and Fulvi Romano, the sheep from the Italian. So how do you make a cheese plate? You know, what do you decide to do? It's not like there's a right and wrong, but a lot of people usually think that you do it by milk type or you do it by country type, but I'll give you a few other ideas as well. You can decide to do what I call like a vertical tasting. So if you've ever done wine tastings, you pick the same wine and you choose different vintages. So I say, why not just pick an all animal? Pick all cow, or pick all goat, or pick all sheep, and do different ages and different textures. Or you can pick one cheese and then pick 3 different ages and see how that goes. With manchegos, you can do a flight of manchegos. By country is always fun. By milk type is always fun. But you can just get creative. You can pick cheeses with flavors. And so everybody that you're getting around brings something. Something has wine, something has pepper, something has saffron, something has truffles, and do it based on that. Or in October for Halloween and then for Thanksgiving, everybody wants orange rinded cheeses. So we have Mahon from Spain that has an orange rind. We have all these paprika rinded cheeses. So you can just pick it visually different too. So there's lots of fun. You might want to pick all square cheeses, you know, but Be creative. There's no like right and wrong going to there. I'm glad he agrees. The other thing is, if you notice where on your cheese plate, you have all different types of rinds. So like we showed here, this is a washed rind. This is basically just almost like a clear rind. There's like a little bit of waxy at the end, but there is a rind here. You had the bloomy rind on the Leonora cheese. You have like a kind of a firm rind here. So when you serve a cheese plate, it's nice to leave the rind on, but because it gives you different colors and it gives you different textures. By the same token, how you cut your cheese for a cheese plate, you can also get creative there. You can make triangles, you can make cubes, you can do sticks. When you have a firmer cheese, you can take the tip of a knife and you can chisel it like you would see chunks of Parmigiano or Pecorino Romano. And in fact, for the Fulvi, for the firm kind of saltiest sheep cheese, that's the one I like to have people take the tip of it and just chisel it, flick it, so that you go with the grain of the cheese and you de-accentuate the crystals. So it helps, one, for the way the cheese tastes, and two, it helps give you different looks on the plate. So you can make all different fun things. Like, did Michael show you his cheese plate? I thought it was a really nice cheese board. I really like that. Different ways of showing it, and you can do big, small, so, but you can just get creative. You can carve your cheese. You know, you can do a cheese carving contest for Halloween instead of with a pumpkin. I think that there are some stores that do that in our industry. So we're going to take you to one more before we go back to the slide. Do you eat the rind? Okay, this is more intuitive. Washed rind, this is kind of like you decide. I always say, try the cheese in the middle, try it with the rind, and try it just the rind. But you, for me, you always should try the inside first, because if the rind has mold, and you don't like the taste of mold, you're not going to like eating the rind. So what's the bother? If the rind of something like this is kind of plasticky, and you like eating plastic, then maybe you want to eat the rind. Sometimes people say, oh, the rind has most flavor, and that's because when you make a wheel of cheese, you're taking milk, you're transforming it into something solid by adding the rennet, which is what coagulates or makes the milk turn solid into cheese. Then we press some of them, not all of them, and then you add salt, because salt helps to set the rind and then start the aging process. So as you taste the rind, oftentimes you taste more salt than you do in the cheese. And this is intuitively if you like to eat that or not. In the Smokin Goat, the rind has the smoked part, and you can still taste it in the center of the cheese. But if you don't like eating rinds, because that's the part that comes into contact with the plastic that it's been done, or perhaps with people's hands, like I'm touching this. Now, I've been using hand sanitizer, but who knows in the country of origin if these people, you know, they're supposed to be wearing gloves or sanitizing all the time, and if you have your hands in way, that in itself is a sanitizer. But you don't know where the outside's been. So it's the part that may collect more dirt and germs. So that's just something to consider when you eat the rind. Bloomy rinds, like the Leonora, a lot of people love to eat this. This is Penicillium candidum. It's not my thing. I don't. So I don't eat the rind. But again, you try it every which way and you determine the way you like it. So it's very, very subjective. And I've read a ton of books where people are like, oh, do this or don't do that. But I don't. You try it your way. Just like when you say, you know, what should I pair? What do you like better? If you don't like red wine and I tell you you should drink red wine with this, you're not going to like it. So you should drink what you like. You can. The fun thing is to just experiment and see how it changes things, because there are certain like chemical combinations that work better than others do. But you should say, let me try a white wine with these 3 cheeses, and then let me see what it tastes like with the red. So everybody, you can make your own decision based on that. I've pretty much determined that the easiest thing is to pick a dry white wine to go with most of my cheeses, and it's versatile. But if you have a nice rosé with body and it's not too sweet, that'll work too. Just be careful about some wines if they have too much sweetness too sugary, because if you have a really aged cheese that has like some of those crystals in the paste of the cheese that we call tyrosine, they can clash. And then all of a sudden, nor the wine nor the cheese tastes good. So that is something that can happen too. Okay, we're gonna go back and meet the Quattro Portoni, the Gritti family for a moment, going back to the Quadrello. Here we are in the heart of what was COVID in Bergamo. They're in the town of Cologno Serio. Unfortunately, Bruno and family were right in the eye of the storm when it started. This is a lovely little town where many of Bruno's cheeses are named for the different entryways to his town that are there. It's a family company. On the next, we should see, well, this is part of the family. They have 950 buffalo that they religiously raise well and are constantly choosing the ones that produce the best milk to have the most quality milk. And usually what they sell off, other people buy right away, but it's not good enough for them. Poor guys and everything. There's been such a shortage of buffalo milk and buffalo cheese until the pandemic, and then nobody wanted buffalo milk and buffalo cheese anymore. It was hard to just give it away. So we're working back slowly and slowly. But these guys, they look big and scary, but they are scaredy cats. You make a sound and they go running. They have these, it's a sustainable farm, and you go and you have all the buffalo who are spaced out properly, and their bars kind of move. And sometimes, like, by mistake, you like hit the bar and it just makes a noise, and then they just go scattering. They freak out. They also create, they take out their waste and they turn it into biogas, which I like. And they're just, you know, it's a great family that works with. Bruno and his brother used to raise cattle, and then they decided to switch it out for buffalo in the year 2000. And they always had in mind to make cheese, but they were afraid. But in 2006, they started to make cheese, and every recipe that they used, they wanted to make traditional cheeses from Lombardy, Italy, with buffalo milk instead of cow's milk, which was the norm. But the milk is different, the properties are different, and they failed. So they had to start from scratch. The Quadrello, I hope you're seeing, and I hope you've let all your cheeses be out for at least 1 hour and breathe, because you should always have your cheeses at room temperature, and so that you can get that nice, pliable, beautiful feeling of that texture, of that voluptuousness on your tongue, and that creaminess. The buffalo just kind of explodes big on your tongue. The family that you saw was Roberta and the wife Elena, and they were in their tasting room, but it's a very united family, and they all work in the business. Bruno handles sales and the cheese making, and Alfio handles the animal husbandry. More often than not, Alfio has like a body part in, you know, some sort of a cast or something, because when he was going to take care of the animals, they would get scared and then they'd hit him just a little bit and he'd end up with a broken arm. So there's lots of pitfalls into taking care of buffaloes. But I never liked buffalo mozzarella at all. And I was in a trade show and I saw this big oblong cheese, and I'm like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. And I went closer and there was this square blue cheese. It was just like this huge cube. It was like twice this size going up. And look, I've been doing this for like 26 years. And I'm still not a big blue fan. And the blue that I almost like the best is the Blue de Bufala, because of the creaminess of that buffalo milk that kind of offsets the spiciness in the blue. But I adore this Quadrello, and that just the voluptuousness and the creaminess with which it is. And it's similar to like a taleggio, because it's a washed rind cheese, but because taleggio is a protected denomination of origin cheese, which has to be made from cow's milk, although it's from the same area, which is Lombardy. You can't call it taleggio. And thus they called it Quadrello for quadro, or like square shaped in Latin. Let's see what the next slide is.
Well, let's take 1 second here.
Okay.
And talk about what you want to pair with this. Is there something that you usually pair this with?
I say you try it with everything. Almonds go with everything. The taralli go with everything. So I would more likely pair it with the fig jam on the table than with the mostarda, because your mostarda is the crab apple, and that's one of the more pungent ones. It's hand sliced crab apples with the mustard oil, but I think it's fun to still try it. But you'll find that you'll taste more mostarda and only the texture of the cheese as opposed to the flavor of the cheese. Whereas you'll have more flavor in the quadrello together with the fig jam. But I'm like kind of weird. I'm the person who like, I'll eat my cheese, then I'll taste my side, and I'll taste it together, but I don't always eat them together. I kind of, I like to do a, what do you call it? Deconstructed plate. Because I want to make sure I'm not missing any flavors of what I get. So I always try and do it in like a triangle, every which way, so I can evaluate which way I like it the best.
Well, I was really surprised that it has as much tanginess. So I was kind of thinking that it was a little bit more sweeter, but I really love the way that that earthiness comes across and that little bit of tanginess. So with the fig, it really kind of it brings out more of the fig and settles down a little bit of that tanginess and brings out more butter. So very nice. Yeah, I really like that.
Did you eat it with the rind?
Yes, yes.
That's
love
where you're
that.
getting most of your earthiness that are there. But the buffalo milk you have, yeah, that light bit of tang just at the end, but it's more, it's what I liked about Bruno's cheeses. It's more sweet though and less of the tang than what it is there. So cool. Michael said that some of these cheeses, he's been in the industry for, how long have you been in the industry?
15 years.
So he's just tasting some of these for the first time too. So this is fun for me. So.
Yeah, this is an unusual cheese. I think one of the biggest problems that most retailers would have with it is because it has a little more difficulty in being able to handle it, and it's not something that can just sit on a shelf for weeks at a time. So fresh cut stores would probably be the best, but it's a very, very nice cheese. A lot of character to it. I love washed rinds are my favorite. I've always loved them. It's one of the categories that I judge at both the international and world, so I really enjoy that. And I chose two things to be able to swap out to pair up with these cheeses. And I got a pale ale with Sierra Nevada and Italian Prosecco. So bounce back and forth between them, you know, to give me a little bit of diversity. But the pale ale works really well with that.
Well, I actually did some single malt whiskey classes when I was in the Caymans and with cheese, and I loved doing tequila tasting with cheese, and I thought it really worked. But the malts, the scotches really worked really well with it. But I do say a lot that sparkling wines work really well with cheeses too, depending again on their sweetness factor.
Yeah, I just finished 4 weeks of Basil Hayden and cheeses, so we ran through a gamut, but that would work out really well. You know, a nice bourbon with that as well, bourbon whiskey. No.
Oh, we won't go the bourbon route for me. That's for
All
another
right.
story.
All right, so our next cheese then, let me get out of your way here. Oh, wait, just a second. There is a question.
Yes.
Oh, they just want to know when they can taste. You can start tasting now. All right.
Yes, please, please, please. Make sure you have Quadrello.
All right.
Thank you for waiting. A lot of the classes I do, they would have already been finished everything on their plate. Okay, so I didn't want to pick cheeses that you could just know. I wanted to pick things that were different. But I also didn't know who was going to be on the class, so I wanted to pick things that were easy enough to find for wherever you guys might be located. Campo de Montalban, if you look close on the rind, for those of you who know Spanish cheese and know Manchego, would look at it and say, but this kind of looks like Manchego to me. Well, I'll tell you a story, because a lot of you know me already, and you know I'm not still 28. I studied in Spain in the late 80s, and when I studied in Spain, this cheese was called Manchego. It's cow, goat, and sheep's milk cheese. My producer uses at least 40% of the sheep and goat, and the rest of it's cow. This style of cheese in Spain was usually like a convenience cheese. So nobody cared about it for quality. It was made because they would make the manchego, they'd make the cow's milk cheese, they'd make the goat's milk cheese, and then they had leftovers. So they just threw it all into a vat to not waste it. And then they would have mixed milk cheese. Most of it would usually be cow, and they just sold it for a really low price. It's not the case with this cheese. I love the different flavors you can get into it. And as the seasons change, it changes a little bit, not as much as it used to, because my producer, who I'll tell you more about in a little bit, told me that he always wanted to give me great quality cheese. So he always guaranteed me a minimum of 40% between goat and sheep, where most of the time, as I said, it's at least like 80% cow. So this is really high quality. The thing is cow, goat, and sheep's milk cheese in today's world can't be called manchego. But in the early 80s, it was a manchego. Manchego was any cheese, pretty much of any type milk, of any age, of any color rind, as long as it was pressed and had the zigzag rind. So it took me like 2 weeks as a student to have like this 2 8-foot tables of zigzag rind cheeses that were like blue rinds and green rinds and pale rinds and brown rinds, and then there was 3-month and 6-month and 8 months, and then there was cow and sheep, or goat and sheep, or cow, goat, and sheep, or all sheep. So it took me a dog's age to find I wanted all sheep's milk, and at that time I wanted like a 3-month cheese, and that was manchego to me. Fast forward like 11 years, and when I came to New York, it wasn't even 11 years. It was like 5 or 6 years. I came back to New York, and everybody talked in the cheese industry. I wasn't in the industry yet. My ex was studying English. He was helping out his dad, and we'd go to a couple of cheese events, and people were like, yeah, we have manchego here. It's sheep's milk. And I was like, what do you mean? It doesn't have to be sheep. But everyone I talked to, they said, it's automatically sheep's milk. And it took me like 5 more years until I met my producer, and he told me that the year right after I had left Spain as a student, they created the DOP. So this DO, the denomination of origin, which is a regulatory body that wants to guarantee the control and the quality of manchego cheese. And that means it has to be made in La Mancha, and La Mancha is comprised of, like, you have Toledo, you have Cuenca, you have Albacete, and Ciudad Real. So you can make the cheese there. It has to be 100% sheep's milk. It has to have, it's not manchego, so you can't have the seal on it, but there's a seal which has to be on the cheese. Otherwise, you pay too much money because maybe it's a sheep's milk cheese that's not from manchego sheep's milk. But this cheese no longer qualified to be called manchego. And so they called it Campo de Montalban. Campo means the fields. Montalban is not Ricardo Montalban. This is not Le Plain cheese, for those of you who know the series I'm talking about. What was it? Love Boat. But the town where my producer is called La Puebla, the town of Montalban. So they just gave it a fanciful name for a cheese that could no longer be called manchego. And so it really didn't have a huge identity. There has been people have been trying to create a DO for what's called Iberico, which is a cow, goat, sheep cheese, but I'm not even sure that they've finished that DO. But this cheese on its own, I chose because it's fun, it's easy, you can dress it up or dress it down, you can shave it, you can shred it, you can melt it, and you can just pair it with anything that you like to have. I often cut a wedge, and then I cut triangles, but you can cut it into a different shape too. But it's just one of those cheeses that you don't hear talked about a lot. You hear about manchego, but you don't hear about the other Spanish cheeses. I feel fortunate to work with amazing producers. My first contact was Carlos Corcuera, may he rest in peace. We were really, really close. We met in a cafeteria off the Gran Via in Madrid, And he was afraid to bring the cheese for me to taste into the restaurant. So he made me go into the garage, the smelly, fumy garage with him, where he then opened up a wheel of cheese on the trunk of his car. And I was astounded. And that was like the 5th producer I had been with, and so disappointed about the quality of cheese. And Carlos was one of my very few producers, even till today, who would call me on the phone and say, Michele, today I've made the best cheese of my life. He so cared about quality. He went to all lengths really to support me, and then Pierluigi and myself. And he and one other of our producers just believed in us for who we were. In today's world, and when you work overseas, you normally have to pay in advance before you get your product. But these guys just gave us credit. We didn't have any money. They just said, we believe in you. We're behind you. And there's not a day goes by I'm not appreciative to that. Carlos worked with his brother Ramon, so I would work with him all the time. Ramon died young at the age of 52. And after that, Carlos was never the same. And I get chills every time I tell this. And he followed 4 years later at the same age. He died mysteriously as well. And his sister, Carmen, took over. Today, if you look at, we can start the slides, please, because I'll show you Carmen and Patricia, who is the legacy, who I've been working with for the past years. This is La Puebla de Montalban, so it's 20 minutes from Toledo. It's a cute little town. Toledo's my favorite place for a lot of things, but they have really great quality milk. Here's some Manchega sheep. This is the plains of La Mancha. Is flat. This one, I know we only showed you sheep, but there's goat and cows in here too, we promise. Keep going. Here's Carmen, and here's Patricia. So we have the next 2 generations that we work with. Amazing people, amazing partners, and we know we can count on them for anything. And they've never wavered from their quality. They went from a teeny weeny little cheese plant to now it's this really big modern plant. One day, I'm telling you, when I went and I started working with them, they worked out of a little white house, and it was just a little white house. The mom and dad lived upstairs, and one day I pulled up and there was this big glass factory, and there was a stream in front, and there were fishes in the stream, and I went, wait, what happened to my producer? And you could see that our partnership had worked well for both of us. As we were growing, they were growing, and then Manchego exploded. Crazy. Manchego and other great cheeses like it. So we feel really fortunate to have this and to bring this to you. We hope that as you taste it, you'll kind of get some of the different flavors of the milks. There's a fun fact when we talk about, usually goat's milk are white in the paste of the cheese. Sheep's milk is yellow, and cow's milk is golden. So you'll find kind of a little bit of everything in this. It'll be like a goldeny yellow, but you really can see the different pastes. You can see in here that this is very white. This one is a little bit less white because it's been smoked, but it's still goat. The color of your Quadrello was more translucent. It's actually kind of like an ivory, creamy, beige sort of color, a little bit greenish when you look at the milk. And so that's something that we never used to think about either, that this industry got me to think about. Do you want to make some comments on, so with Campo, would be good with the Tarali and with the nuts for sure, and with the fig jam, and I think it would still even really hold up with the Mostarda. I think it has enough of the balance of the acid and the different flavors for it to work with it too. And crabapple's perfect time now as we go into fall. Gosh, it's one of there.
I think with the saltiness and the crab apple is absolutely fabulous. It just really brings out the best of both of them. Really nice. This is a great cheese.
I love this cheese. So,
Yep.
And by the way, the rinds, the colors of the rind actually used to have a meaning, more than they do now. The colors of the rind was used to denote the age. So a clear rind was the youngest cheese, and a dark rind was the more aged cheese. But there was the first importer of Manchego to this country, screwed it all up for us. they started bringing young manchego with a black rind, which was even illegal. But nobody wanted to, after they spent all those years as like one of the few people bringing manchego that had a black rind, anytime you brought a manchego that was a young manchego and it didn't have a black rind, nobody wanted to buy it from you. So my 6-month and my 1-year age cheeses were all the correct, but I had to make a dark rind cheese for 3 months, which drove me nuts. The clear rind that I had, you know, there were so few people that were buying it. Everybody's like, we want a dark rind. The people think it's dark rind, but it's not, it wasn't supposed to be that way. And for Campo, there's no rules. It's just we wanted to pick a color that wasn't going to look like a manchego, so we picked a nice green to match my eyes. Kidding. Sorry. Got to have a sense of humor, always. Okay. Any questions?
Nope, not so far. Just that one comment.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to our next slide. The Smokin Goats. This is a pretty new cheese for us. This is what it looks like. So if you notice, he's wearing a jacket, a tie, and he has a monocle, and he's smoking a pipe. This cheese comes from the Canary Islands. It comes specifically from the island of Fuerteventura, and I think we have a slide about that. Can we see the slide? Here we go. So this is the Canary Islands over here. This style of cheese is made in all of the Canaries. They call it tofio. And in the other islands, smoking cheese was historic and done all the time. On the island of Fuerteventura, what they actually used to do was to roll their cheeses in the earth, and the earth was red. So we have another cheese called Alicios, which is done with paprika, and that's to evoke how most of the cheeses in Fuerteventura were preserved that way. In any case, this is a young 15-day-age goat cheese made by a company that's run by a man named Esteban, who had 72 hours to learn the business of cheese making. He came back from school after being away for 10 years. He arrived. His dad said to him, "Hey, son, I'm so glad you're here. You know, I'm really tired of the cheese business. So you have 72 hours to learn the entire thing, and then it's yours." And that was 13 years ago. And he took over. He has the goats, and they have a lot of goats. He has the cheese plant. He is responsible, or their company is responsible for over 80% of the milk, using the milk in the Canary Islands. It's a huge responsibility to all of those farmers. The milk for the Smokin Goat comes from the island of Fuerteventura. We also have goat's milk from other parts of the island. Look at this beautiful goat. You guys must think I'm nuts, but I have learned to love my farm animals. And this is a big, beautiful Majorero goat that produces very rich milk. This and the Murciana that we'll meet next. But the Murciana goat is kind of short and stubby, whereas, you know, this is like a big goat. There's some which have the most amazing horns and all over. But really rich milk that help give this nice milkiness to the cheese. It's a mild cheese, yet it has good flavor. The smoke isn't intense. I don't like really smoked things, so the smoke just enhances it. And it's fun, it's easy, it's meltable. I mean, you can make some great quesadillas or a pizza on this, nachos. But it does represent very well the tradition of goat's milk cheeses in all of the Canaries, and it's really fun. We always try and have cheeses from every single region within the countries that we work. So I haven't been able to do that from Croatia. I have a really cool sheep cheese from the island of Pag called Paški, which is like 10 sheep for every wheel of cheese. I'm not sure how many goats it takes to make this, but that's really, really low yield. But I haven't yet found great cheese from other parts of Croatia. But in Spain, I really am aiming to have, and Italy, cheeses from every corner in every region that we have. And it's not easy when you have to bring cheeses from an island. There are transport issues. So we're out right now of 2 cheeses because cheeses come from the middle of the ocean, then they have to get to Madrid, and then from Madrid they have to be loaded and they have to get here. So we're crossing our fingers and can't wait till it comes. And I have to say that the name has helped the cheese start to be very successful. It's hopefully it'll grow like the Drunken Goat did. We have the Drunken Goat here with us today, just in always like to have our Drunken Goat available to us. And hopefully you like it too, because it just really hasn't been in the market for that long, and there really wasn't much smoked goat around. So part of what I consider my job to be is just, what can I find that I'm taking that is as it is in the countries that we work with, so that I'm not Americanizing it, but that bringing it as in the highest quality that I can, and not changing it and then introducing it to the American market and making you fall in love with it, which is even more important. I need to make people fall in love with it. And at the same time, share who our producers are. And as you look at a cheese, I want people to remember the name of the people who make these things. I want them to look at a piece of cheese and say, this is Esteban, or this is Bruno, or this is Carlos. This is what I want for their legacy, so that they know what they do makes a difference. And I tell them that all the time. You know, you are very important to us. And I know that they love working with us for that reason too. We have been working with some producers for over 20 years. And that's a long time. That's a really good marriage. That was Esteban and his dad. I got to meet Dad, is it a year and a half, 2 years ago now? I was hoping to go back for the wedding. Spain has to get a little bit safer from everything going on. So what are you thinking of the Smokin Goat cheese?
You know, this is something that you don't have to pair anything with. It's just so good. It's got a nice smokiness to it. There's a little bit of tang. It's just a fabulous, easy to eat snacking cheese. It's fabulous. And as you mentioned before about leaving it out for at least an hour to be able to, come up to temperature and bring out the flavors, this is actually a very creamy cheese once it warms up.
Yeah. I mean, it's really aged only 15 days. That's super young. So Campo, for example, is at least 100 days, but I think right now we're eating some 6-month cheese because they were a little bit backed up. Quadrello is aged 20 or 23 days, something like that. So yes, this is very young by all means. And a fun fact, if you look at the rind, it's kind of like these little squares. So what the producer did to do this years ago, they would take palm leaves and weave them together, and that would be the mold of the cheese. Today, of course, it's a plastic mold, but this used to be palm leaves. Whereas this crazy zigzag on the Manchego and Manchego style cheeses, this was woven from esparto grass. And so that was also woven into, it looked like, I don't know what you call those, like espadrilles. That. So the rinds come from a traditional things. A lot of Italian cheeses were made in wicker baskets. So they had that ridge, those lines around it, like a basket. And that's exactly what they used to be aged in, was the basket. Okay, cool. Let's see what else our slides have for us. Leonora. What a guy. Okay. There you see it. And I held it up a couple of times. What a goat cheese. It's like a wedding. It's like a layer cake. It's so dense, creamy, citrusy. Now, the way a goat cheese works, and I don't know if you can see this too much, but this is called Leonora a Fuego. It has under the rind a paprika. It's a new cheese that's coming in that's spicy. So it's got the same look on the outside, and then it has this heat from the paprika inside. It's super hot in a good way. So this is what we call a cream line. A cheese proteolyzes, so it starts to, some cheeses in the way that they're made, this is a soft ripened cheese, As it ages, it's going to age from the outside in. So this is going to break down little by little, and it's going to get creamier and creamier and creamier. And the white space is going to reduce, reduce, reduce till like it's going to be here. And then you have softer, more pungent, very flavorful product. So this is this style of cheese. Now, the producer, he's a crazy dude. His name's Oscar. Oscar lives to make cheese. He was in the hospital just a couple months ago. He's been in the hospital more times than I can count. He had to have like 2 hip replacements. He had a problem with his knees, and most recently he had a problem with his back. He was supposed to take it easy, stay at home, and rest. His rest, he went back to make cheese. He said, I can't live without making cheese. This is Oscar with his wife, Patricia. They used to work together. She was the scientist, the technician, the quality control person, but they're happier as a couple when she doesn't work with him. So they've raised these amazing 2 kids, Tristan, and I forget this other cute little one's name, but he's nuts. He's really fun. I think there's some pictures of him. He has like a bright purple van, and he has purple clothing. And the one helper he has with him, she dyed her hair purple to be like, to be as part of the scenery, let's say. But what he does is he makes great cheese. This cheese is made with a different type of goat. It's called the Murciana goat. I think we should have a picture there. Do we have a picture of the other goat? Or did they not? There you are. So very different looking goat. Shorter, brown. Sometimes it has like a little mask around the eyes. There's either Murciana or Murciana Granadina. The darker color is more of a blend, and this is more of the true Murciana goat. Also produces milk rich in fat and protein. So you get a creaminess and silkiness. When I used to hate goat cheese. I really used to hate goat cheese because to me, like the soft white stuff tasted like tree bark or wood chips, or it was just so like, it was like sharp for me. It was bitter. And like, that just wasn't my jam. So when I went to Spain, I tripped over this cheese called queso albino, which was later became my drunken goat cheese. And the key ingredient for me was the Murciana goat's milk, that sweet milk. The animal breed has so much to do with what a cheese tastes like. So the similar, and most of my goat cheeses from Spain are Murciana, but this one was the Majorero goat. And I do have one other goat. I have to think about it. When we get to Extremadura, there's other varieties. But those cheeses on the west coast of Spain are earthier cheeses. Their goats are a little bit different. They don't have as high a butterfat content. The terroir is different. So what an animal is, what an animal breeds, what an animal eats, all is very important. Here we are. I named this cheese. It didn't have a name. So it's from outside of León in Spain up here. Really beautiful area, very, very green. And so I called it Leonora after the area. A lot of times in Spain, cheeses just didn't have names. They were called goat, aged goat, young goat. So I had to do something. I knew it wasn't going to sell if you just did that. Hi, can I have that goat cheese? No, that goat cheese. No, that goat cheese. So I just try and get creative and come up with things that help recreate where something comes from. And this is Leonora. And I hope you, and I like this cheese now. This style of cheese, you wouldn't get me to touch with a 10-foot pole when I first started in the industry. I had to grow up to this. So it was fine to have a cheese like Smokin Goat or Drunken Goat, but that white stuff, that took me a lot more courage because I had tasted so many bad cheeses. Now, mind you, everything that I say, there is fact and there's subjectivity, and I know that. But since it's our company, we have the luxury of bringing the things that we love. And in order to sell something, I think I said this before, I have to love it. It's very evident if there's something that I have because I have to have it, but I don't love it, I never talk about it. And I certainly would never bring it in a family today to share with you. But these are like these are my great babies. So I'm hoping that you'll enjoy this lemony, just you know, dense, sink your teeth into it sort of cheese.
I've been a huge fan of goat cheeses, and especially, you know, you think about Cypress Grove with the Humboldt Fog style there, and having all this similarity, the richness that you have here. This is such a creamy cheese. What do you usually pair with this?
I often do a honey. I just didn't want to go. So honey is super great drizzled. I have this one condiment, which is nutty. It's called a rope, which is concentrated grape must with candied pumpkin. It was brought to Spain with the Moorish invasion years ago. And it's like, you could use like a saba. So, or like, kind of like, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, just something that's like a cooked down vin cotto or balsamic, but I'm not a huge balsamic person. So something very viscous, but so you have that sweetness, yet you have a little bit of bitter. That's fun. I mean, the fig jam is classic with it. So, which is why I chose it for it. But, you know, you can get really fun with this.
Yeah, that's what I did. I did the fig jam with it, and it's just, this figs are, it's so thick and rich. It's really just spectacular having these two together, because it's almost a meal. Well, you know, the thickness and so much flavor, and it pairs up really well with pale ale too. So that's kind of nice and easy.
It's those textures I want you to have. You know, you can tell you're eating real food, that there's no additives. This is, you know, food at its best. So it's not watered down. It's just true good ingredients. And you don't need to do much if you have just really great ingredients to start with. So that's what the base always is.
Well, you know, when people are trying to accessorize, a lot of times they use fresh fruit. My idea is that, you know, you got to find it, and it's not always seasonally available. And that this, you just have to open up the jar and you have as good, if not better, the flavors that you're going to get from the fig. So that's a great fig jam. Beautiful.
Thank you. I'm lucky to work with, you know, the people that I work with just have such great fruit things. They do. This is like, I'll just brag because these are our new packaging, which I'm very excited about. We do like all the fig cakes and date cakes from them. It's all hand pressed. It's all, you know, just so minute detailed work. And you have to get all your figs in at the harvest and make sure you have a good harvest, and then make sure that they don't dry out too much, and how you take care of them. And then everyone is destemmed by hand. So whatever goes in here too is destemmed by hand, one by one by one. It's crazy. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, it shows.
Thank you. Okay, so we have two guys left, and they're both sheep. And my first love that I started was with sheep's milk, because when I lived in Spain, Manchego was my favorite. And then when I went to Italy and I lived there, I found this cheese, Cacio de Roma, because when I met my ex, I used to go to their restaurant all the time. And when I would eat the cheeses, I always would pick the one with the black label. And that was this cheese here. It was Cacio de Roma, a semi-soft sheep's milk cheese from Rome. This was the second cheese that Forever Cheese, or as Sini Fulvi, ever sold in the US. And it was a really hard thing to sell because it didn't have a category. It wasn't Manchego. It wasn't Romano. It wasn't cheddar. It wasn't Jack. It was a semi-soft sheep's milk cheese. So who the heck goes to a store and asks for semi-soft sheep's milk cheese? It was tough, man. I'd do demos and demos. And I'd say, what kind of cheese? It's a semi-soft sheep's milk cheese. No. But what kind of cheese? It's like, I'm telling you, I thought I was like one of the Three Stooges, or just kept going back and forth. But this cheese is very, very, very close to my heart. This is a typical caciotta, or little wheel of cheese, that you find in Italy. And as you go from Italy, from north to south, you find more sheep cheeses in the center and the south of Italy, and more cow's milk cheeses in the north. When you have a little wheel, they would call it caciotta, which cacio is a slang word for cheese, and caciotta is like little wheel. And we used to have all these people like going to stores asking for caciotta, and that's just like a generic term. So that could have been anything. It could have been all sheep. It could have been mixed. It could have been cow and goat. It could have been from anywhere. So to try and figure out what people wanted. So we knew that this style of cheese could do well, but we had to try and find a way that it equated with what people would want when they came back from Italy and then could get in a store. This is a mean quesadilla. I love it on pizzas because it's so melty. And I always tried, my thoughts of it were I couldn't eat much cheese when I was a kid. Since I was 15, I knew I had a cholesterol issue. I did learn that eventually, of course, growing up, it was cow's milk, and then it was skimmed cow's milk cheese, and then it was low salt cow cheese. And finally I said, I'm not eating cheese anymore. And I stopped eating cheese. And then I went to live in Europe. And it was like eating Technicolor. I was like, oh my God, this has flavor. This is worth eating. And it was like, this is kind of what I grew up with, but this had more flavor. So all I needed was a little bit of cheese. And that's what I just tried to convey to people. And that's why I understood why sheep's milk was such a popular item in Italy and in Spain. You just need a little bit and it goes a long way. But this is really steeped in tradition, not just of the countryside of Rome, but in Tuscany. They might call it Pecorino Toscano there, or Pecorino Senese. In Abruzzo, they do sheep cheese. There's Pecorino Abruzzese. The word pecorino means sheep in Italian. So this is a pecorino. It's a younger pecorino. This is Pecorino Romano. The DOP cheese is Pecorino Romano. So I can't call this Pecorino Romano. I can call it a pecorino, but it's not Pecorino Romano. There's only one Pecorino Romano, and that's this cheese. So this is a cacciota. We call it Cacio de Roma, which is Roman slang. Proper Italian would be Cacio di Roma, and people correct us all the time. But this is something from my, for a long time, was from my partner's family, and just steeped into the tradition of where it is. Can we see the countryside of Rome? Is there some pictures for the? I love the countryside of Rome. Everyone else can have, yeah. Nepi, and with this whole area, well, this particular cheese now, we switched where it's made for different reasons, but it's still in the countryside of Rome, about 40 minutes from outside of there. And the Roman countryside is so beautiful. Everybody talks about the Tuscan countryside, so I've got the Roman countryside to myself. But beautiful, lush hills, really cool, the trees. I love the trees. But the sheep there, a lot of them are the Sopradesana, the Sicilian sheep. These sheep have great richness in their milk. There's a lot of variances between the milk quality and different types of sheep. Yeah, this was a very nice looking herd, I have to say. There were lots of these. This day I got to see a baby being born. It was really cool. And then, can we see the next picture? So here's some cheese production. This whole time you haven't seen anything. So these are the vats that heat the milk. And then you add cheese cultures, and then you add rennet, which is this product that's generally in liquid form, although it in the olden days was the lining of the inside of an animal. And that helps spoil the milk and turn it solid. And then once it gets solid, you have this inside which kind of cuts the curd and goes around and around and around and around. And if it's a softer cheese, or you have a larger curd. And if it's a more aged cheese, you have a smaller curd. And then you're gonna pour, this is the pouring of the curd into the molds. And then what's really important, and little Miss Muffet, little did you know, is actually very scientific. She's talking about separating the curds and whey. You need to separate the curds and the whey as fast as you can, or the whey can make your cheese taste bitter. So there's all different techniques that can be used, of like the table leaning down, or having a separate whey for the way that the manner in which my first language of cheese is actually Italian, so I have some of these gaps in what it is. The molds that they're in, just kind of lifting something up so you can separate the curd physically from the whey of the cheese. With this one, these ridges come from like the straw mat, and the straw mat lifts up the curd from the whey that comes out of it. So there's all other different ways. And so that's the separation of the curds and whey. And then you have the curd in the mold, and then it might be pressed, as I talked about at one time, and then it'll be salted, and then it'll go for aging. All the cheeses, before they get packed and come to anywhere, usually end up having mold on the rind. And then they might go through what I call like the car wash, and you have to brush it off on the end, and then you package it. But again, mold, you get it on your cheese, embrace it, be happy with it. It means it's alive, and that nobody's put like preservatives like natamycin or other things that just make it go away. Your cheese is natural. And I can never, talk more about that. Are there any other cheeses, photos from the Cacio de Roma?
There was a question that I missed when we were at the smoked goat. Can you eat the rind? And that would be delicious as well. So,
yeah, you can eat the rind. It's your choice. There are more and more, I see people these days in Europe, they're putting inedible rind on the labels. So look at that. But I think it's more because people are just like scared. Nobody wants to have any problems. So they're writing inedible rind. It annoys me because if there's no preservative on the rind, you can eat it. It just depends whether you will enjoy it or not. And it is the part that people touch. And it's the part that touches the packaging. So you just weigh that and then decide, what you want to do for there. But it's not harmful. It's a natural smoke.
So with this particular cheese being so young, and it does have a distinctive earthiness to it, what would be your suggestion for the pairing?
For what we have, it'll still be better with the fig jam. But I think because it's sheep, you could still, make a case for it with the crabapple mostarda and see what happens. But you'll be safer with the fig jam.
I shut my mic off so I could crunch through this because they're very loud there. So I tried it with everything, and it is a beautiful cheese. Works really well. There's that nice earthiness that I adore. I think it's really a wonderful cheese that way. And having a younger Pecorino Romano style is really cool. So thanks for bringing that one.
Oh my God, thanks. This literally was, if I don't have to limit my cheeses, but I would shred it, I'd shave it. Okay, this was one of the things that I used to do. It was the hardest thing to decide in Rome. Did I want dessert or did I want fried cheese? Because they take this, slice it, flour it lightly, and just griddle it until it oozed, a flat griddle. And then you just get this oozy cheese. And it was ridiculous, like really ridiculous. Now, those of you who know me, well, I love my chocolate, but that made me give up chocolate sometimes just to have it like that. But I think what I like about Italy is you can have your cheese as an app, and then you can still have your dessert. Not like France. So there you have to make your choice, or if you have enough room at the end. So that's one of the things I love to do. This is Fulvi. Genuine Fulvi Pecorino Romano. Without this cheese, well, my partner always jokes he'd probably be on the beach today. Oh, actually, he is on the beach as we talk about it. I don't know where I'd be, but this is one of the last remaining Pecorino Romano cheeses produced in the countryside of Rome. And I say one of the last because as soon as you say it's the last, there's going to be somebody who's making 2 wheels a day. And no matter what, they're making it, so then that will make me a liar. And I don't want to be a liar. But Pecorino Romano was born in Rome, was born in the countryside of Rome. Technically, you could have made the cheese in the provinces of Rome, Latina, Rieti, and Viterbo, where we are. The cheese for many years was made just there. The sheep are the same sheep we just saw in the Cacio de Roma. This is Nepi again, so we have the same sheep that make the cheese. The cheese has to be at least 50-pound wheels, but if you look here, our wheels are like 65, 70 pounds. They have to have the seal of the sheep. It's like a triangular sheep with dots. It has to say Pecorino Romano. This black rind that you saw on the front wheel used to be mud. something about mud. I think that the US government would like for cheese to come in that way, but it was like the typical way to preserve the cheese years ago. Roman Pecorino Romano has a sheep that produce milk that is richer in fat and protein. And on top of it, the Fulvi family, who the Cini family bought the cheese from, aged their cheese longer than what the DOP said it had to be. The DOP, when I started in 93, this cheese by law had to be aged minimum 8 months, then 6 months, and now only 5 months. Because in the end, the greatest majority of the production isn't in Rome anymore. It's in Sardinia. Sardinia has cooperatives where a lot of people take their milk, go to a cheese plant, make the cheese, and it keeps the cost down. The sheep there don't produce a milk as high in fat, and they produce more milk. So the ability to make the cheese brings the cost down again. So in the world, it costs less money. And since the majority of the volume for making this cheese is an industrial cheese used in sauces and in potato chips and in everything else, people were more interested in price than anything else. This price imbalance eventually forced out most of the Roman producers, so that when I started, there were 3 of us. And today, of those other producers, they've all gone out of business. I have chills again. It's really sad. They were my competitors, but they were our brethren. They were the people that we were like the Roman producers holding up the tradition of a cheese called Pecorino Romano. I got mad with the president of Slow Food, and I had exchanged some words years ago. And he was trying to tell me Pecorino Romano was born in Sardinia. And I'm like, that is absolutely ridiculous. There is like sightings back to the days of Caesar for Pecorino Romano. This is Pepe wearing one of our hats. He is such a funny joker. He has a specific Napoleon hat that he saves for me when I go there. And then he puts gladiator hats on people. Pierluigi's father, when he died, this was Pierluigi's father's partner, who takes over and runs this plant along with Pierluigi's brother and cousins and different things. So they maintain the tradition of this amazing sheep's milk cheese, which today is still between 10 months and 1 year of age as opposed to 5 months. And we don't skim the milk. Most of the people in Sardinia skim the milk. So when you look at the cheese, it's very yellow. Most Pecorino Romanos, if you have it in your mind, are very, very white. As you taste the cheese, play with it, please. Play with your food. So break it off, mash it in your fingers, feel that it's not as hard as it seems, and that there's still a lot of moisture in the cheese. For this cheese to be as special as it is, it needs to be aged in salt. A lot of people brine their cheese. This goes hand salted. I think we have a nice picture. It goes hand salted wheel by wheel by wheel. Every week, then every 2 weeks, then every 3 weeks, so that the salt gradually seeps in to the center of the cheese. Can we see if we have some? We might have a salting picture here. I can't remember.
No salting picture.
No salting picture? Okay. Anyway, the salt has to go in gradually, because if you block the salt on the rind, then the center of the cheese will be bland. If you add too much salt on the rind, it creates rind, so that you as a consumer buying the cheese have something more that you have to grate, so you have less of a value. If you do it slowly, you have less of a rind and you can eat more of it. Sometimes it's hard to discern salty from sharp. This cheese is both. It's been aged for 3 months in salt, but it's sharp because it's aged so long, and it's sheep, so it's sharp sheep. And a lot of people just think salty right away, but if you pay attention as you're tasting it, you'll get the sharpness and the sheep, and then the saltiness for me is not overpowering. This is something I eat by the chunk. There's a festival called Pecorino con le fave in May. They take fresh fava beans and they just peel them and they just eat them with chunks of pecorino and drink lots of wine. And I have to say there was a lot of white wine there, even though red sometimes can overpower the bouquet of this cheese, but very often this cheese will overpower the bouquet of most wines. It is a big, bold cheese. This cheese, as opposed to Parmigiano Reggiano, where we grow up, where our terroir is, there's the cooking and the cuisine changes. So center and south of Italy are hearty cuisines. So you need a cheese that's going to stand up to the cuisine. So there you'd use Pecorino Romano. If you use a cheese like Parmigiano, you're throwing your money away because you need to use too much cheese. It's a better value to just use a little bit of this. Red sauce, spicy, capers, flavorful things need a flavorful cheese, and you use less cheese. Caesar salad, I vote for Pecorino Romano because you have anchovy and mustard and all of those ingredients. And if you use a grana or a cow's milk cheese, you need way more texture and flavor than if you use a little bit of just punch of a cheese. At the same time, if you add Pecorino Romano to a risotto with the cream and the cheese, it's too much. You need a lighter cheese, so there you use Parmigiano. So depending if you're making a light dish, you use a cow's milk cheese or a cheese that is a sweeter flavor. And if you have a hearty dish, you want something that like this cheese here. A cool fact, every wheel of cheese has an address on it. It tells you the month of production, the year of production. It tells you the name of the producer. This was important to us because when we first started, I didn't say this cheese costs more. I sort of said that we got pushed out of business, most of the producers, because it costs less in Sardinia to make it. But sometimes that difference in price could be $4 a pound or more. And when there were articles written over the years, they never explained the difference in the labor and the handliness, or that it's a single producer versus a co-op, and the sheep having less milk. So nobody ever talked about that. But there's a very big difference in cost. So some furbi, and that's the word for like foxy smart Italians, would dress up their Pecorino Romano wheels from Sardinia with the black wax, make them a little bigger, and sell them to Italians in the US and say, oh, they'll never know the difference, but they'd charge them more money because they'd make them think it was from Rome. So that wasn't on the up and up. So it was important for us to have a way of showing people that our cheese really did come from where we said it. And every wheel of cheese showed it. And often our competitors would just be like, oh, they don't make their cheese there, they're lying. And this was just like, I'd lose a sale for 1 penny a pound, and I'd lose a sale of cheese. This is the Pecorino Romano market, not this cool specialty cheese market. So it was a whole other world, which I'm so happy that we're in the specialty cheese world, although I have to say that right now still sales are super weird. People have kind of forgotten about a lot of the specialty cheese. But through it all in all, if it weren't for this cheese, I wouldn't have fig cakes or mostarda or Portuguese almonds or torta da casar or tarali. I wouldn't have most of what we do because we had to be successful putting this cheese where people wanted to sell it. And we still have a long way to go. We don't sell enough of it. It's in some of the best shops and restaurants across the country, but it's still Pecorino Romano, which suffers from an image problem because the producers between the two areas, oh, I didn't tell you the story. In the 1950s, the president of Italy was from Sardinia, and he changed the law. He said, I come from Sardinia. We have economic hardship. We have all these sheep. We need help. I'm going to make the law that now Pecorino Romano can be made in the countryside of Rome or in Sardinia. And that's where everything started to change. And it just really, so most of the Romans are out of business. We are the representative of Pecorino from Lazio, besides like one other guy. And it takes a lot to explain why this is so different, why somebody should pay more money for it. And we don't have the luxury of having like a united front, like the Parmigiano, all the producers have a consortio and they kind of all are on the same page when they go to sell something. But over the years, the Sardinians and the Romans have never like joined much together to sell their product. And it shows. It's harder. But anyway, we have to always have things to strive for, and that won't stop us. We'll keep going. But yeah, it's a lot of history for this cheese. I'm very proud to represent it and every single one here. And I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today, for eating and teaching and learning. I hope you find that the Fulvi and the crabapple mostarda really balance out really well together, and that you found a lot of new fun things to enjoy with your time. Thank
We
you
do
so much.
have we do have a last question.
Awesome.
And so it is, since mold doesn't mean it's bad, how do you know if cheese is bad?
If you taste it and it burns like hell in your mouth that you want to spit it out, it's probably bad. Sometimes you talk about ammoniated, so it can be in the smell, but I find that that's, if you don't work with cheese all the time and you just smell a cheese, you can't always tell, because if a cheese is in your refrigerator has a lot of smells, and it might commingle with all other smells from what's in there, and it might be difficult to discern. So I would take it out, you let it breathe, and you taste it. And if it doesn't taste like the way it did when you first started and you don't like it, then you don't eat it anymore. It's not like the mold makes it be poisonous. It doesn't. It's just really not always as attractive to look at. And then the way a cheese goes bad, it just really depends on the type of cheese to know. But they change. Some get too hard and they crack. Some get too soft and get super stinky so that you just don't even want to put it in your mouth. Some things get, we saw today here, cheese mites. So it looks like the rind is just breaking down, and it's just tiny little like bugs, these mites that jump around and like form like like dirt, and they just grow on more on hard cheeses. So there's 1,000 different ways that something can be bad, but a lot of times it's just using your olfactory smell and then your taste buds to taste a little bit. And the reality is you want to try and you don't leave your cheese forever in there. I'm very guilty because I'm traveling a lot, although, and so sometimes cheeses just get hard and dry out. And when you find some cheese that's starting to dry out, before you throw it away, try taking olive oil and rubbing it on the rind and letting it sit a little bit to see if it'll perk up again by having that olive oil, not on the rind, but in the face of the cheese. And otherwise you just, have to like kind of look at it and see it. Even sometimes the top layer of it looks like it might have gotten browner or drier, but if you cut into it, it might be fine again. So you just have to try and see.
It is different. It's creamier than typically you find the Sardinia style of being drier and a lot more salty. This has got more buttery flavor and sweetness to it, along with that little bit of salt, which works out.
Because we're not skimming the milk, in addition to the richness of the.
Yeah, so you're really getting that cream flavor out of it, which is really nice. And the fig jam, perfect. Just wonderful with that. So really
and the
nice.
Crab apple mostarda?
Yep, it worked too. Yeah, I'm now this is now going to be one of my favorite accompaniments. I love the tanginess. I love the mustard in this. That interesting flavor that comes across is just because you get the sweetness, but then all of a sudden you get that that tang, that sharpness that's in there, and I that's magnificent.
I wonder, actually, I'm going to try it on an ice cream.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. It would be really good.
Fun.
Yeah. Well, it's just like putting cheese on fruit. It just works very naturally. So I have to say this has been spectacular. I enjoyed every single one of these. I love that you brought in the slides so we were able to meet your producers and to see it on a map. That was very, very special. I really appreciate that. And of course, the choice of cheeses, just magnificent. So thank you so much. And it's just such a pleasure to be able to taste through such high quality cheeses that are just Beautiful. Great choice. So thank you so much.
Thank you so, so much. Thank you, everyone, for being with me today. It means the world. Thank you, Michael, really.
You're very welcome. And again, thanks for taking the time. And this will be available on my YouTube channel, Michael Landis Cheese, in next couple of days. So we'll see you there. All right. Bye.